Hello and welcome back to the Invictus podcast with me, Gareth, and Sab, as always, here on Thursday nights and uploaded SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. Good evening, Sab. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It's been another eventful week, hasn't it, in Invictus Racing? We've got the excitement of the Belgian Grand Prix. F1 is back. We've had a ton of big news today, so yeah, plenty to discuss this evening.
Yeah, big time, and yeah, as you say, plenty of news and big stories coming out of F1. Summer break, as you say, it's over. We're back in Belgium this week, and then on to double heading with Italy next week. And yeah, it's going to be a really fun 2 weeks of Formula One. And yeah, welcome back, everyone. Good to have you listening and watching. Let us know where you're listening from and what you're listening on. Always good to hear you enjoying it. And we'll get straight into it. And the big news start of the day broke just this morning is the F1 2020 calendar. 22 races. Now we were just discussing this off air. What's your opinion on that? Because 22 and we were just saying that this does feel like it's going to be sort of like the edge of a cliff because it's going to go one way or the other. We know that Liberty are looking at 24, even 25 races in the next few years. Is 22 too many races?
Yes. Answer, yes. If that was the hot lap question, it'd be over very quickly. 22, yeah, is, in my opinion, way too much. I think 20, I think 19, 20 would be plenty for an F1 season. Um, we'll get on to discuss the certain races on this calendar shortly, but it's like you say, it's on a cliff, isn't it, with the amount of races and how they've squeezed them into this schedule. It's going to really test not only the drivers but everybody who works within Formula One behind the scenes, team personnel, mechanics, and everybody else who tags along in the circus that is Formula One. So yeah, I'm not keen on it. Yeah, we get more racing, but overall, I'm not keen on the idea of 22 races.
So you were just alluding to there about who it affects, and it's obviously not just the drivers. And although it will put extra strain on the drivers, and you have to prepare yourself for maybe not having as much rest time in between races. Like we is 7 back-to-back racing. I think Australia and Bahrain back-to-back. You got the Netherlands. We're obviously going to Zandvoort next season. That's back-to-back with Spain, which is back on the calendar after we thought that it was dead and buried. They've managed to re-sign this year. I think you've got back-to-backs in the likes of France and Austria. Where else have we got one? We've got one in Belgium on to Italy, of course, like we've got this year as well. The Singapore and Russia, United States and Mexico. So yeah, there's a lot of back-to-backs, and yeah, what is the impact for these guys that are working not just in the garage but also in the factories or in catering? How does it affect them? Is because it does feel like they're going to be away from their family for what is now like a much longer period of time than what they were probably expecting.
Exactly, yeah, and it's added stress and strain not on the people, not only on the people track side, but like you say, at the factory and all those people who have got families back at home and they're missing their loved ones and stuff. A lot of people don't tend to think about everybody else who makes up Formula One and makes it able to run like it does. A lot of people just think that the drivers get in the cars and off they go, get the checker flag, and then they move on to the next race. And it's not as simple as that. I've seen quite a few people on social media today who work within Formula One not particularly happy with this calendar, and you can't really blame them. I would not, if I had a family of my own, I would not like to be away from them for big, large chunks of time throughout a year because especially if you're a young family and you're growing and learning with each other, you're not going to get to see them for those great years. And I personally find it frustrating because It looks like to me they're aiming it now towards more of the people of the young single person who's not too bothered about traveling for work and being on the road for mass parts of the year. And yeah, it's you've got everybody like you say in the garage. When you've got all the motorhomes in the European season, all those guys have got to come in and build all them up, and it's a lot of work. And back in the factory as well to make sure they've got enough spare parts and everything else. It's added, in my opinion, it's added way too much load and way too much pressure on teams now to be able to perform because you could, like you said, just tip over that cliff edge, and it could prove to really. Well, you could end up with mistakes from teams where they might not be able to get parts made up in time and ready, but just because the workload is too much. It's asking a lot. It's the Formula One and Liberty Media. I think just look at it as a an entertainment service to the public and the paying viewer, and they don't really look at the everything what's underneath Formula One, and it's gonna take its toll, I think, next year.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a very sort of American way of looking at it. That it's I think to kind of take uh, the human element out of it and just look at it purely as a financial and entertainment basis. Of they want to show this off as much as possible, get as much equity and capital out of it as possible. So it for Liberty, this is the perfect thing for them to be going to all these new countries that are potentially going to put a lot of money into hosting a race. That it works perfect, and you can look at the likes, and it's not comparable in the slightest. And this is a very tenuous sort of comparison, but the likes of WWE in the World Wrestling Entertainment business, they basically run 365 days a year. They give their performers only a few days off, and you can tell a lot of them get burnout, and it takes a toll on their mental health, and you can almost compare that across to what I expect to see quite a lot of these guys, because it's not just the drivers, it is those guys that are sitting in the factory, and we know that like some of these guys that work in the factories, especially in sort of these development departments, are working around the clock overnight
Yeah.
quite regularly, and especially over race weekends the offices will be full 24 hours a day with creating data, getting simulations, and especially for these sort of these teams towards the back end of the grid that need as much extra help as possible.
Yeah.
It's just going to put so much strain on those staff. So yeah, it is going to get to a point where we will need to really assess how it's affecting the human element as opposed to the entertainment element. Because as a fan, I'm willing to give up two races a season if it means that the people that are working as part of that entertainment business and industry and department and whatever you have and whatever your role takes you, um, if it does mean that those people get a little bit of a break, because yeah, seven back to backs, that's I mean it's that's tough. And we saw the
Yeah.
triple header. Was it this season or last season? I can't remember which one it was. And I mean that was, they said, well, we could never do that again because it's just the teams are just working flat out. You think those poor guys working in the garage, and yeah, but it's this or next year, 2020, of course. It's the addition Vietnam, the Netherlands, and the reinstatement of Spain. Vietnam goes third on the calendar. It comes just after the Bahrainian Grand Prix and just before China. Netherlands just after China, so we've got 5th of April for Vietnam, 3rd of May for the Netherlands, and then that's a double header with Spain on the 10th of May. Now, I don't know about you, but I mean, we were just discussing off air. I would be fully on board with, and I know that countries, when they set up their arrangements and their contracts with F1, they set out a date, and they basically have that date ready each year, and that's their slot, so that they know how to prepare. I would like to see the calendar kind of completely refreshed, and not just to keep costs down for the teams, because some of the races we've just discussed are in positions where it just doesn't make logistical sense.
No.
But equally, it's you got to think of the and we're getting into a society and a part of our culture now where you've got to look after the environment, and these teams are having to ship large pieces of equipment across the world every week or two, like depending on where they're
Hmm.
going, whether it be by car and going by lorry, or if it is by plane, which we obviously we see when we go to all these Northern American and Asian countries. And if you put somewhere like, let's take Canada for an example, that's slap bang in the middle of the European season. So you've got Netherlands, Spain, Monaco, Azerbaijan. Then you go to Canada. Then you're back over for France, Austria, Great Britain, Hungary, Belgium, and Italy. Now, why not put Canada either with the USA and Mexico, or move it, I don't know, towards or just before or just after the European season, so that you're not having to have this unnecessary trip across the Atlantic, um,
Yeah.
which just that I don't know. It makes no sense to me. I think, like I said, it's contracts are in place, and Canada would have that assigned slot like they do pretty much every year, and it will have its sort of second week in June slot. But it just seems to make little sense. Like I said before with Azerbaijan, that should be next to Russia. The two
Hmm.
countries are basically next to each other. Have Azerbaijan with Russia. That makes more sense. Have France next to Monaco. I don't think you don't really. I don't think your casual fan will look at a calendar and think that having all these races in sort of region locked like sessions, so having European season, having a North American session, like I don't think that they go, oh, that's a bit weird, because I think it just makes logistical sense. I don't know what's your opinion on how
I
they date their races.
I totally agree with everything you've just said and what we said uh, previous to starting this podcast. To me, Canada's always for a long time anyway has been always around the Monaco Grand Prix, hasn't it? And even then, I didn't understand why that was. That was just bizarre from my point of view. I've always said exactly like you. It should be around the American and Mexican Grand Prix. It would make logistically more sense, and it would make things a lot easier for everybody if they were all locked into their own little areas for that specific part of the season. Um, yeah, I totally agree with you as well with Azerbaijan. It just makes no sense to me at all. Like you say, it's obviously because they're locked in with their contracts, but I don't understand the need. Like you say, it's all about looking after the environment and stuff now. People are trying their best to do what they can for the planet, and even F1 have gone all these hybrid and stuff. It makes no sense then to then lug all this gear unnecessarily halfway around the world, all wrong directions. You wouldn't say I'm traveling to London from the north of England. I wouldn't go to Scotland first to go to London. It makes no sense. So why would F1 do the European season? But hang on, wait, we're going to go to North America just for a detour, and then we're going to come back again. It's just bizarre, and only F1 it's only F1, isn't it, really, when it comes to stuff like that? They've always done it in their own particular way, and unfortunately, I don't think I could see it changing where Canada might be with the USA or Azerbaijan with Russia. It seems to be a case of just going just going wherever they feel like it, really, and they're not. Well, I don't think they are. Well, I assume they would be, but it doesn't appear to be like they're bothered about logistics and everything else. What goes on behind the scenes to get these races underway in the order they are.
No, and it's also cost value in it as well, because we there's been so much talk about keeping costs down and bringing in a cost cap to keep F1 affordable. and by sort of shortening the distances between races, or at least the race circuits on the calendar, you're bringing down that travel cost because you're making it sort of more affordable. And yes, you're going to have to visit these places eventually, but if you're going, uh, take the likes of, you've got Monaco and France. I think Paul Ricard and Monte Carlo are split by something like 150 kilometers. So it's something around that. Like, why isn't that together? Because that should be an easy trip. And if you're going to do that back to back, do that as back to back. Because it just means the guys have to drive along the south coast of France, which I'm sure they probably won't mind. And but yeah, you go Monaco, then you over to Azerbaijan, then you've got Canada, and then over to France. So I think that, yeah, it's a frustration because I think that it is unnecessary in the way that they set out the calendar. Like we said at the start, it's basically predetermined. These countries, they when they organise their contracts, they get given a date slot, and it may change by a few days depending on that year's calendar, or if we get a new race enter, like with Vietnam or the Netherlands. But I don't know. I think it could be tidied up to be a lot more cost effective, environmentally friendly, and probably just fairer on the drivers. And then going back to what we were saying about on and everyone else involved, like these guys that work in the garage and all that sort of.
Yeah.
But yeah, just we were started on talk about, is 22 too many? Now, I was reading a story quite recently that Liberty are hoping in the next few years, and by 2022, to make it 25 races. They are very interested in racing in Africa, being the first rate or the first circuit in Africa since we left Kailami in South Africa, with two tracks currently being decided on, whether they go to both or one. But it looks like we're almost nailed on to go to Saudi Arabia at Qadiyah in 2022, which is going to be very as Abu Dhabi like to do it, and kind of like take away the title for, or make things that are going to be special to everyone. It's going to be longer than Spa, so it's going to become the longest F1 circuit on the calendar because of course it has to be. It's going to involve a roller coaster that's going to go over parts of the circuit.
Oh dear.
I mean, is it blood money? Possibly, definitely, but
Most definitely.
yeah, but I'm not a massive fan of having to go of going to Saudi Arabia. I think it's a vanity project. It's not out of love for the sport. And then equally, I think you'd go to a track, and I don't know what time of year would you even go to Saudi Arabia, because we've seen the likes of Bahrain gets put sort of earlier in the year. It's so March time, so that it's not obscenely hot. So I'm guessing that it would have to be around then, because if you've got a track that's longer than Spa, and so you're putting a lot of strain on the drivers, a lot of strain on the cars, the teams, and you've got that in Saudi Arabian weather. It's I just think that's a bit of a recipe for disaster there.
Yeah. Would what do you think? Would they go night race similar to what Bahrain do now to help get the temperatures down? Because you know that Middle East, they do love a night race out there, don't they? They love to see the cars under lights and see the whites of the driver's eyes. But like you say, it's 25 races. Jesus, it's just it makes me feel tired just hearing that. I dread to think what everybody who works for me in F1 must think that. But for me, my question is then, on the current 22 race calendar, I'd like to know your opinion. Based on the fact that they've given us more races for next year, do you think that they should extend the summer break to give these people who work with an F1 a longer time off to fully recover and recharge their batteries?
Yeah, yeah, I think I wouldn't have an issue with that at all. Whether you add on another week, and maybe even sort of ending the season a week later. and we see in I think in F2, they have a huge gap between their penultimate and their final race of the season, and they race at Abu Dhabi. But before that, I think the penultimate race of the season is a month before. So if Abu Dhabi really wants to hold on to this, or with the season-ending race and all the fireworks and the faux glitz and glamour that they like to protest, then why not give it sort of like its own sort of season-ending finale slot that's a month ahead, so these guys have like a 3 week break in between Brazil and Abu Dhabi to switch off and like because I don't, it's unlikely. It's very unlikely in this time we are in Formula One that you will get a championship challenge going to the final race. And yes, I imagine they want to keep it at 2 weeks because the drivers, if you did have a championship fight getting down, they wouldn't want to sit at home twiddling their thumbs for a month. But I don't know. It you do need to make concessions for these guys. But so we've got Saudi Arabia that looks like it's going to be making its way onto the calendar in a few years time. Obviously, dependent on whether it gets given Grade One or FIA Grade One, sorry. And but one track that has just been given FIA Grade One status, and this one is interesting. Is Finland and the aptly named Kimi Ring,
Yeah,
and and it's a new circuit. It's currently being finished up at the moment. However, I believe MotoGP tested there quite recently, and their drivers said that they think the track is quite slow for at least for bikes. So if it's slow for bikes, that doesn't sound too promising for putting
no.
these cars on it. So yeah, Finland obviously you've got Kimi Raikkonen, Valtteri Bottas at the moment. Um, is that could potentially make its way onto the Canada. You've got Marrakesh in Morocco. They've just held a Formula E race. They've shown interest in holding a Formula One race and have equally mapped up a very extravagant looking circuit and done an artist's impression of that. So it's it does seem like the calendar could get potentially quite cluttered. And although I don't expect to see Spain on the calendar too much longer. This is almost a bit of a stay of execution. It's been given a 1 year extension. Um, there was talk today on Twitter that Liberty had said that Germany may make a comeback, whether it be at Hockenheim, whether it be at the Nürburgring in a few years' time, depending on if they want it or not. That adds another race to the calendar. So when when does enough become, or when does it become
Yeah.
too much, really?
Yeah, I agree. You're going to end up, aren't you, where the season starts in like February and doesn't finish till the end of December. It's just bonkers, and I don't know what to say really. What we've already said with this, it's like I say, I find it all frustrating and worrying as well because do we? I understand there might be fans in the likes of Africa and whatever who want to see Formula One, but do we really need to go to these places? I know it's a money thing with Liberty, and they want to try and get to the F1 as far out as in the world as possible, but they don't. They just don't. For me, they don't do anything for me. I don't understand why we need to go there. Personally, we should just stick to the 20 races, stick to your core group of tracks, what we all love, all the fans love, and then just add a few more in, and then that I'm sure the fans, I'm sure you would be just happy with that. I don't understand 25 races. Do you imagine the cost for fans, for example, if you decided you want to go to Marrakesh? It's just, yeah. I don't think you'd want to go to Marrakesh. I certainly wouldn't want to go to Marrakesh. But my point is, you imagine the cost for fans to get to these sort of places as well. If you don't live in one of these countries, it's all I can see is it's going to drive money up, not in terms of the pockets of Liberty Media, in terms of the teams having to spend money, and in terms of fans having to spend money, and that to me is just not good at all.
No, and you've got to look at it as if it's your fan experience that kind of really will drive everything. And like you say, will it become more expensive to get there? Because these tracks have got to be they've got to have the infrastructure to allow you to get to the circuit, and that's an issue that we've seen through Formula One for decades, that so many tracks have come onto the calendar, and just the infrastructure to allow a huge number of fans to get to the circuit just isn't there. That's why we lost India, that's why we lost Korea. You
Yeah.
just like so many people just couldn't get to the circuit. Look at what we have in China, and China's it's just outside Shanghai, but it's so awkward to get to, and then equally when you're there, the atmosphere isn't particularly great. And then I fret for Vietnam. I don't know what the whether this is just being skeptical, but I don't know. Is there a huge outcry for Formula One to have gone to Southeast Asia and Vietnam? I know it's sort of a replacement for Malaysia, but Malaysia dropped off the calendar because people stopped going,
Yeah.
and they couldn't afford to host the race anymore. So, and then you look at places like Russia, and I mean, it kind of it with Daniel Kvyat in at the moment, it will have a bit of a kick up the backside, but equally, do you want someone like Vladimir Putin presenting your trophy as sort of a bit of a PR exercise for him? Yeah, it's all very I don't know. 2020 will be an interesting season. And I'm sure by the end of that year we'll find out if F1 can accommodate, because if it can, I think we can be sure that Liberty will make sure that they add even more tracks to the calendar. But the next track on the calendar will be the Belgium Grand Prix coming up in the next few days. Of course, first practice starts tomorrow. We've got big news that's come out of Formula One today. We've had two driver announcements for new teams. Of course, Esteban Ocon has been announced that he'll be moving to the Renault team, so he'll be replacing Nico Hulkenberg and Valtteri Bottas. Bottas, blah, 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 blah. There's a slip of the tongue. Valtteri Bottas. He will be retained as a driver alongside Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes for the 2020 season. Is this the right decision?
For Mercedes, it is because Lewis is comfortable, isn't he? Because I'm not being harsh on Valtteri. He's had a better season this season, but I think Lewis knows that he's got Valtteri in his pocket and he's not going to be a threat really to his world championship. Bottas might be saying today that he's going to be going for the title next year, but just being a bit realistic, I'd say he might win a few races like he has done this year, but he'll probably end up the same outcome. So Lewis, I think Team Lewis, as I call Mercedes, will be very happy with that. And with Esteban Ocon, I'm pleased that he's back in Formula One because I think he didn't deserve to be dropped out the way he did. I know we've discussed about Daddy Stroll's team and all that. But for me, the one I think I'm really frustrated for with all this news is Nico Hulkenberg because this season, the team, and last season, the team have not given him a good car at all. And since they brought Daniel Ricciardo in, Daniel Ricciardo has clearly been marked as the number one driver. Nico Hulkenberg early in the year complained about team orders going against him. I think it was in Canada. Team orders going against him, which cost him points, good points and stuff then. And yeah, he's not scored as many points this year, but the car's not been very good at all, has it? If everybody thought it was going to really push on this year and push for that fourth place in the championship, and it's harsh on Nick Hulkenberg because I think if he'd have had a better car under him, he'd have got the results. He's always a consistent, steady point scorer, isn't he? So for me, I've got my fingers crossed that the likes of Haas, who have said today that they are looking at Nico Hulkenberg, that he could potentially go there and stay in Formula One because I think Formula One would definitely miss Nico Hulkenberg if he dropped out for next season. So
Yeah,
yeah,
he's definitely F1's nearly man at the moment, isn't he? Because I think
yeah.
back in the early 2000s that was Jarno Trulli. He then when he got into Renault, he managed to pick up that win in Monaco. And but yeah, with Nico, what is the right move for him now? Is it to go to Haas? Is it moving out of Formula One? What's the next step for him?
I see. He'd have to weigh up his options, wouldn't he? Because Haas is a pretty much a bit of a sideward step, maybe even a little backward step. Because Haas themselves this year have really disappointed, haven't they? They were another team what was expected to kick on, especially how good they were last season, and you thought they'd be pushing as well for that fourth spot, and it's just not worked out for them. Kevin Magnussen, who's been confirmed he's staying there for 2020. So if Nico Hulkenberg was to go there, there's obvious rivalry between Nico and Kevin from previous races in the past where they've not got along. So that would be a quite a fiery partnership if they were to team up. But it's tough to say with Nico. I think he's because it's been announced fairly early. I think it'll give him time to assess what he actually wants to do, whether he sticks at it with Formula One for a bit longer and see what Haas can do for him, or whether he ventures out somewhere else like WEC or even Formula E. But if personally, if he ventured Formula E, that for me would be a big step down because eh, Formula E, it's all right, but it's not Formula One, is it? And I think every race driver, if they've got the opportunity to race in Formula, I think they'd rather race in Formula One than Formula E.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and it would be a shame to lose Nico, and he is one of the more consistent drivers on the grid, and he is just a nice guy. You can see in interviews that he
Yeah.
just enjoys what he does. So yeah, it would be sad to see him go, but I don't know. Is it the right move to go to Haas? Like you just said, he's not got on with K Mag. They've decided to. Well, is it officially announced that they're holding on to? He's got a contract, but I don't
Yes.
know if it's officially announced.
Yeah, I think he is staying there from what
So
I've read today.
I see. If I was Gunter Steiner and Gene Haas, I would have seen how my two drivers were this season and just decided from next year just to go completely fresh. This year for Haas has been turmoil. It's been disaster after disaster. You've had the issues of sponsors. You've had drivers colliding at several races. They now vocally say that they don't trust racing each other. If that's the case, you just I think what would have worked better for them is just to start on a clean slate next season and go. If you want to bring Nico Hulkenberg in, bring him in. Have him as your experienced driver, but then bring up someone from F2 or over from America. I think you've got the championship leader Nick De Vries in F2 at the moment, who was dropped from the McLaren academy a few years ago because of the Lando Norris effect, and Nick would be a perfect person to put into that car, and he he has that potential. He's young enough to be able to sort of learn off of Nico, and then but if you wanted to look to America, you've got the likes of Oliver Askew that's winning races in Indy Lights. You've got Colton Herta who's in IndyCar, the 19-year-old who's already won a race, and he's becoming a bit of a sensation out there. Like if they want an American driver, they can go find one. But I don't. We said this before when we talked about drivers. I'm not a fan of Kevin Magnussen. He I I don't think he's particularly earned the seat that he's in. Whilst he's been at Haas, yes, he's had a good few qualifying sessions here and there, but he doesn't stand out as someone that I'd want to sort of both represent my team, but equally I could trust him to come away with points because he does make silly decisions and gets involved with drivers on and off the track. So yeah, that's an interesting decision for Haas, who if they are going to pair him with Nico, because I don't think that they'd want to have another season where they're having to do a little bit of crowd control between their drivers.
No, definitely not. I think purely it's down to the fact that Kevin has just outperformed his teammate. I think it's not much more than that. I think he's got already once again more points than Roman. So yeah, I think that's probably the only reason why they did name. I can't remember the other two now, but they named three drivers Haas today who they're looking at getting in at that team. I know Nico Hulkenberg was one. I'm just frantically trying to scroll through Twitter now to see if I can find it, but I don't remember seeing it. But yeah, I don't know with Haas because I think what they need to do now is like reset and like you say, start afresh for next season because this season has just been a disaster, hasn't it? Like we've discussed on previous podcasts. So yeah, I'm going to be interested to see in the next few weeks what their decision is on their driver because it's clear today that Roman is out and I think probably out of Formula One now.
Yeah, yeah, it's looks like it might be a swap over to WEC or to Formula E for him, and I mean, anything could happen. There's even potentially a spot going at Alpha. Giovinazzi, he's not safe, and yeah, anything could happen there. I think obviously Kimi's got one more year on that contract, and I think after that year is done, I think you'll lose one famous name out of the Alfa Romeo team with Raikkonen, but you might gain a lot more, well, a much more famous name, and I believe that you might see a young Schumacher sitting in the Kimi Raikkonen seat in Alfa Romeo in a year or another 2021 season. So yeah, Alfa might want to pair him up against someone with a little bit more experience than Giovinazzi, who just hasn't really had a good season so far. Um, Haas also they do have Pietro Fittipaldi as their test driver at the moment, so he's a potential one to jump up. Of course, grandson of F1 two-time F1 champion Emerson Fittipaldi. So yeah, Pietro is he's in with a shout of it. He born in America, races under the Brazilian flag, so it kind of works for the obviously Gene Haas's American racing team that he has a half American race driver if he chooses on going that way. But looking back towards the front end of the grid, and this is a race that should, in theory, work in Ferrari's favour with how their car works. Can can they get past this sort of first half of the season slump that they've had? Is this the probably the best opportunity? These 2 weeks, Spa and Monza, these will be Ferrari's best opportunity at a race win. If so, is it Charles or is it Seb?
That's tough, isn't it? I think they've got to stop beating themselves first, haven't they? Their team calls and strategies haven't helped them, even on top of the problems with the cars as well. So they've got a lot to do. It's crazy to say, isn't it, that it's a year ago since Seb won a race. That's just incredible to say, really. If he was doing this podcast this time last year and we said this would be Seb's last race win for a year, you wouldn't have believed it, would you? So it just shows you where Ferrari have gone. I honestly, the way Mercedes are going at the minute, you surely can't rule them out as favourites for either race. Ferrari do have that raw power and straight line speed, but I just think Ferrari will either cost it themselves or the car just won't work for them. I still believe Ferrari will go all year without winning a race, which will be, I think it'll be curtains for a lot of people at that team if that happens. But for me, I can't see Ferrari winning this weekend. I think they'll probably go good, but I think they'll end up in a battle with Max for the podium places.
Yeah, and you talk about Max. He's got a teammate or new teammate this for this second half of the season in Alex Albon. He'll be in his first race in Red Bull. What does he need to do this weekend? Obviously, he's there replacing Pierre Gasly, who was regularly around 6 tenths off of Max in qualifying. Where does Alex need to be over the next few races? Can he be kind of given the next few, like maybe one or two races to kind of get up to speed, or does he really need to kind of be supporting Max in a challenge for essentially get Max second in the drivers' championship because Max is in a direct battle with Valtteri at the moment,
Yeah.
and equally get Red Bull that elusive second place in the championship and that extra sponsorship money going into 2020.
Um, I don't know if you're aware, but Alex will be starting at the back of the grid this weekend. They've got an engine penalty in that Red Bull, which is not ideal, is it? He's going to be under big pressure, but I assume Red Bull have surely just said to him, look, we know the situation we've put you in. Just go out there and see what you can do. Do your best, basically. It's talk about throwing him in the deep end, Dave. I think the real test will start for him at Monza when they've got this engine penalty out of the way, and he can qualify properly and see where he gets him. But I agree, if he can be more consistent than what Pierre was doing and be that one place, two places closer, then Max and Red Bull have a very good chance of stealing that second place for Max and second place in the championship. It's yeah, like we've discussed, you can't blame them for the decision they've made. Like we've said, we wish him all the very best. It's just I think this weekend is going to be very tricky for him. But in that Red Bull around Spa, I should imagine he could still get into the top 10 even from the back.
See, I was thinking, does he need to get is sixth like realistic for him? Starting from the back, it is a track that maybe doesn't suit Red Bull as well because of the long straight, obviously down the Kemmel Straight. But I'm sure that sixth will be the goal because I mean that car should be realistically faster, and he's probably going to have to fight through with the likes of the McLarens and maybe the Renaults. But you'd think that that's his realistic goal. Um, you'd expect to see him make some moves off the line, and then equally, you can never count out safety cars at Spa. So yeah, I think that six isn't off the cards for Alex, especially in the machinery that he's got. But it will be, I think, it'll be a really interesting race from his point of view to see what he can do, especially if coming from the back.
Yeah.
How he can kind of he's going to have to adapt from that Toro Rosso and now into the Red Bull, where he's going to have a different setup, different garage, different race engineer, all that. It's going to be yeah, Alex has got a lot of work to do, but I said before I've got full faith that he can do it. He's always gone very well at Belgium in the junior category, so expecting to see him do well. But on to the big man and Lewis Hamilton. Second half of the season, can he be stopped? He can, if he outscores Bottas by 78 points, he wins the championship.
No, it's another simple answer. You've given me some really easy answers to that. No, Lewis, when Lewis gets the lead, he's pretty unstoppable, isn't he? In that Mercedes, he'll see it out. He'll play the sensible game if he's running second or third one race. He'll probably not go for any crazy moves to cost him any points. He'll just make sure he scores good points and keeps that championship going on the path it's going. I can't see Lewis letting this lead and this championship slip through his hands now. He usually goes better from the second half of the season as well. So expecting, I reckon, to be lifting the title sometime around America again. The way he's going, he's comfortably the favourite. The only thing I can think is that maybe Red Bull or Ferrari that get that together, but I surely don't expect that because I think if I've also read today Mercedes have had an engine upgrade as well, which an already dominating car gets an upgrade. It's slightly worrying, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure the rest of the grid aren't going to be too thrilled with that one, but like I've said in the past, they've got the best car and they've got the best people working on it. So you're always going to have a team that dominates, and if you've got a world-class driver at the head of that team, then I don't know. I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those naysayers that doesn't like Lewis Hamilton. I'm fully on board with Lewis, and yes, I have favoured teams. I would prefer to see McLaren and Williams do better than what they are, but Lewis is and will go down as one of the best drivers of all time. So to be most likely in a few races' time a six-time world champion, you can't ignore that. People will say, yeah, but he did it in a time where that car was so much better. Well, okay, we'll take away four, maybe five of Michael Schumacher's world titles when Ferrari was completely untouchable. So it's yeah, Lewis potentially could wrap up the title in Japan if he blows Valtteri and Max out the water. If not, yeah, it is looking like USA and Mexico are more likely. So that'd be around 25th of October, 1st of November to have him crowned six-time world champion. But looking down through the rest of the grid, we've got an interesting story that came out this morning, and that was concerning Alfa Romeo. And they've recalled Marcus Ericsson from IndyCar, where of course he races for Aaron Schmidt-Peterson Racing. And they had a race this weekend just coming up, but he's been called away from that. Connor Daly's taken his spot in the team, but it's he originally it was thought that he would be taking the place of Giovinazzi, and that Gio had been dropped for the rest of the season. And that was doing the rounds on Twitter this morning, and a couple of publications had tweeted out that it was to replace Joe, but it turns out now that it might be to replace an injured Kimi. So apparently Kimi has in the break pulled a muscle in, I believe it's in his back, I was reading, and is struggling on quite strong painkillers at the moment. So potentially we might see Marcus Ericsson take over from Kimi at the weekend. I think they're going to let Kimi run in practice and see how he feels. But this is quite big for Marcus, because he's not out of the question for being potentially put back in the team in the place of Gio next season.
Yeah, I agree, but I'll be honest, I've never really been a fan of Marcus Ericsson. I've met him a few times. He's an absolutely lovely guy. I just think he's just never performed in that car when it was a Sauber and Alfa Romeo now. He's if he does come in, he's got to pretty much get on it straight away. Kimi has been exceptional, hasn't he, in that car this year, and the main point scorer. And if Kimi cannot race this weekend, Giovinazzi, who has struggled for points, they'll be looking at Marcus Ericsson to get in and around the points to keep Alfa Romeo fighting the constructors. And if that's not the case, then surely they can't go with Marcus Ericsson next year to replace Giovinazzi, because they'll be wanting as much points as possible from both their drivers, not just from one. So it's going to be interesting to see if Kimi does manage to do it. Personally, I think Kimi should be all right. I think he'll work through the pain, and I expect him to race. But it was a surprise to hear about it. And like you say, at first I even thought it was to replace Giovinazzi, and it just shows you, doesn't it, the position Giovinazzi's in now, that these rumours are now circling him of his seat potentially being taken for next year, for this year or next year. But I think Giovinazzi's probably got one or two races more, and then that'll be his fate decided. So, yeah, Marcus Ericsson, I, if they went that way, I don't think that would be a step forward for Alfa Romeo. I think it would just be an easy option for him because he's on their books.
Yeah, and Gio does have a lot of work to do if he is to keep that seat. 25-year-old in his first full season, and he's being absolutely blown away by a 39-year-old. And yes, it is an ex-world champion, but Kimi should really be in the sort of the twilight or the sunset part of his career and just kind of sailing off. And but yeah, he's wiping the floor with his much younger teammate at the moment. So Antonio's got some work to do over the next few races if he is to convince Frederick Vasseur to keep him on board for 2020. But then, like I was saying earlier, I'm not 100% who they'd move up into Alpha, because they do have a working relationship with Prema in F2, but there's no one really in Prema at the moment that I think is ready for F1. You've got the two test drivers for Alfa Romeo are Tatiana Calderon and Juan Manuel Correa, and I don't know whether I've given my thoughts on Tatiana Calderon before, but she is possibly one of the luckiest drivers in a single-seater car at the moment, because and this is purely objectively not based on anything to do with gender or sex. She's just not fast. She's done very well by using her sponsors to get her in positions where she can be a test driver for a Formula One car. But she's just not a viable option to move up to the top team. So yeah, Alpha have got. I think if they are going to replace Gio at the end of the season, it's going to be someone uh, quite unexpected because it's not going to be anyone from the Ferrari Academy. There's no one really ready at the Ferrari Academy. Of course, you've got the likes of Schumacher waiting, and even they, I think, have said that Ferrari have said that he needs one more year in F2 just to kind of iron out those kinks because he did jump up from F3 very quickly. So yeah, it might be all change at Alfa Romeo, if not the end of this year, but definitely at the end of next year. But so that's the Belgium Grand Prix. Can't wait for F1 to be back. I'm sure you can't either, and it's I'm sure you'll enjoy watching the McLaren boys back on track. But
Yes.
what we will do is discuss our own escapades around Belgium. Of course, we are an esports racing league on PS4, Invictus Racing League, and it was round six of our championship this week, and we were equally at Spa-Francorchamps. And we started off on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Twitch.tv. In fact, on this channel, and it's the No Assist Championship. And it was Scopefielder who took the win again ahead of FPL Charlie and Sammy the Pito. And it was a good win for Scope, who kind of really needed that after what happened in Brazil the week before.
Yeah, definitely. He's he's a man who's in form, and I think he's also fighting in F1, isn't he? In the equal performance, what we were talking about earlier, and I think he'll definitely be there fighting for the championship towards the end of the season. Sam Pito as well. He came in at third place, back on the podium. A strong race once again for the Haas team. Definitely, I would say they are the favourites for the constructors' title now. They always seem to be in and around the podium position. So yeah, a good race for Haas just before our week break, and they'll be wanting to kick on shortly after we get back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a really fascinating end to the season, or second half of the season. Six more races to go, of course, and but yeah, really looking forward to bringing you that one. So make sure you follow us on this channel for live action from that. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Tuesday nights 8 p.m. with Tim and Malk in the commentary box. You've got the Realistic Performance League, and I will just mention with the No Assist Championship going into the break, you've got Scopefielder leading the championship ahead of Sammy the Pito, and Boy Ben No reigning champion Scott is in third. I think the top five are split by 12 points, so super close for those guys. But yeah, on Tuesday nights you've got the Realistic Performance League. Of course, cars are allocated week to week on based on the performance of the last race, so you will be in a different car most weeks. But this week it was Jos who took the victory. Ahead of Ton Albanak, formerly known as Wave and Tell, and TL44S was in third position. Now, of course, this is a league that you also race in, Sab. How was the performance league for yourself on, and how were the results? Was it a deserved victory for Jos?
Yeah, I would say it was a toss up. I'd say between Jos and Ton. They both battled hard from what I watched back on the stream. I think Jos just about deserved it in the end. But I just like to say the start of the race is probably the worst conditions I've ever driven on in Invictus. It was the only way to describe it. It was like a monsoon. We had a safety car come out. We had a virtual safety car come out. It was a very tough race to be part of, which eventually went to dry conditions towards the very end of the race. Myself, I did finish third, but unfortunately got a 3 second time penalty towards the end, which demoted me down to fourth to my teammate TL44S. He thoroughly deserved to pick up another podium. That's his second podium he's picked up this season, and he's going well. He's probably the best of the rest of like Schofield, Ton, and a few others, and Mr. Skyzy as well. So yeah, it was a good race, very tricky. I would much prefer a dry race than to what we experienced there. I'd just like to say, if you want to check that out, please go to our YouTube channel because it is a very interesting race to watch.
Yeah, and that one is brought to you by Tim and Malk, 8 p.m. on twitch.tv. You can find out all the links on our socials, which we'll give to you at the end of the podcast. Leading the championship going into the break, there will be a race next week during the season break. They will be replaying their race from Austria, which should have been the first round of the season. Unfortunately, due to connection issues, was unable to go ahead. So they will be racing around Austria next week in the season break. But it is Wave and Tail that leads the championship by 3 points to Sky Z, and then by 5 points to Scopefielder. So top three split by 5 points, and then TL44S, I should say, he's 15 points back. So still in with a chance. Technically, could take the lead if the top three crashed out and he won and got fastest lap. He could, in theory, take the championship next week. On to Wednesdays, and we have 3 leagues, equal performance on Wednesday: F1, F2, and F3. Of course, F1 the fastest guys here in Invictus, and that is brought to you by Tim, and he commentates on that one, and that one was won by FPL Charlie, who made his debut in the F1 League, moving into league after picking up a second place in no assists, and he's raced in no assists all season. He's come into F1, and Scopefielder was on for breaking a record, breaking the most wins in a row, and he was on for, I believe it was his 6th or 7th win in a row. But unfortunately, Charlie's come in and taken the win away from him.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been best pleased if I was Scopefield, but on that case, but from what I understand, I obviously haven't managed to see the F1 race yet, but it didn't sound like a particularly good race for Scopefield. I think even if FPL Charlie had to win, I think he probably would have struggled to get the race win. Unlucky really for Scopefield. He's been on a rich reign of form, hasn't he, in F1 this season? He still leads the championship, as you'll shortly tell us, and I'm sure he'll not be too bothered about that, and he'll be knuckling down and focusing on getting the wins back in 2 weeks' time.
No, absolutely not. He was leading the championship by I believe it was around 40 points or so. So perhaps even more than that. He had taken the opening four races of the season, and it is him leading the championship. He came in 6th on Wednesday. It was Foxy Red 2000 who came in 2nd, and CPI Alex came in 3rd. And in fact, it is those 3 that head up the championship. So you've got Scope, Foxy Red 2000, and CPI Alex are your top 3 in F1. Moving on to F2. And it was a dry race to start with, and then got progressively wetter as it went on. It was a bit of a race of attrition. We saw several cars crashing out, and especially up Eau Rouge and Radion. And unfortunately, myself included, decided to bin it in the wall, which was slightly unfortunate. But yeah, it was. Apart from that, it was a good race for the Warrislander, who made it 2 wins in a row. The Dutchman made it a Dutch 1-2 with De Lange, and De Lange back on the podium, which is good to see from him after he rejoined the lead. And then Polish driver No Fudge was in 3rd after, unfortunately, Core Tactics was in 2nd position on the final lap of the race, came up Eau Rouge and just lost the back end. Didn't spin, but he just lost he lost about 5 seconds as he tried to recover the car and dropped off of the podium from 2nd to 4th. So Core was not particularly happy with himself after that. But yeah, so it was Warrislander, De Lange, and No Fudge were your podium sitters on F2 for Wednesday night. And that means in the championship it stays as it is, with Humbo Stone leading. Unfortunately, he couldn't race on Wednesday. Meg Lugby came in, I believe, in 5th or 6th. So yeah, I think he goes level with Humbo Stone. And then Steen unfortunately crashed out, and he is in 3rd position. And then on to F3, which of course is Sab's league, and it was a good race for the guys in F3.
Yeah, it was a good race. We had a dry qualifying and dry race, so for myself, much better, but unfortunately it was a race to forget for myself. Up at the front, Ferocious Dan got back to winning ways yet again. Drove a very commanding race from himself. He eventually finished around 13 seconds ahead of Mike, who Mike's, since he's dropped down from F2, has been very, very quick in F3, always consistently in and around the podium positions. He came in second with Nice Niels, who's a new guy in F3. He picked up his first podium. He started P5 and drove a good race, but yeah, finished third. Myself. Um, Finished down in 10th, picked up the fastest lap, so a bit of a race to forget, but just to go quickly back onto Ferocious Dan, he's looking firmly like the title favourite now. Mike's obviously going to keep the pressure on him. I think he'll be Dan's rival, but I think if Dan keeps going the way he does, he should be able to wrap up this title. He's very, very fast this season.
Yeah, it might be a little bit of a case of deja vu for Mike. Of course, was chasing myself all season long in F3 last season, and unfortunately just came up short with me winning the title, and Mike just 6 points behind, and he's going to be chasing Dan all the way. So it's going to be a good fight between those two, who have got a little bit of a gap between themselves. But then you've got the likes of Luke Bailey, who's still staying in there. He's not that far off. And then you've got the likes of Brennan. So Stephen started the season well. F1 Richard is potentially a late season push for him. So yeah, F3, there's a lot to do there. So yeah, you can catch that one Wednesday nights, of course, 8 p.m. as the rest of them are. As that is commentated on by Malk himself, of course, the voice of Invictus. And yeah, that was our results from this week, round 6 of the championship for the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on F1 2019. And yep, you can catch all of those streams back on YouTube by going to the YouTube channel Invictus Racing League. And yep, it's Monday night, it's Sab and I commentating. Tuesday night is Tim and Malk. Wednesday night, you've got F1 is Tim, F2 is Energy Dan, and F3 is Malk. So make sure you go and check out all of their streams, and equally you can go to our socials and find the social media handles for all of our commentators. But we will wrap up for this week. But before we do, of course, it's Sab's favourite time of the week, and it's the hot lap question. And I give Sab a question. He has 1 minute to give me his answer and explain the reason why. This one is a very interesting one, because he's going to have to really think about it, and to get this done inside a minute is going to be impressive. Now we've been discussing circuits, and as we did last week as well. Of course, if you haven't heard that one, we ranked our favourite circuits of the F1 calendar, so go back and check that one out on all of your podcasting sites. But this week's hot lap question for yourself, and with a minute on the clock, is: you can create your own circuit using 3 different sectors. Now, those 3 different sectors have to be from different F1 circuits, so you can have one sector from one track, second sector from another track. What are the 3 sectors that you're choosing to create your perfect circuit?
I've already got the first 2 sectors. Just thinking now, I would have the first sector from Belgium. I'd have the second sector from Silverstone. The third sector I'm struggling on. I would have the third sector from Japan, 130R. So that's what I would have. I would have Belgium, Silverstone, and Japan.
So that's, your car's going to go left and right a lot over that lap.
Oh yes.
So there you go, picking 3 of the most iconic circuits on the F1 calendar. You've got Eau Rouge and Radion later, and then you've got Kemmel Straight, Les Combes, and then you'd go into Maggots, Beckett, or Cops, Maggots, Beckett's, going down the Hanger Straight and leading into 130R and the Casio Triangle Chicane. That's a pretty. I'll tell you what, I want someone to draw that track for me, because that'd be an incredible one to look at. But yeah, well, good one there. That was a great answer. Enjoyed that one. And that is us done for this week. And thanks for listening, guys. It's been a pleasure bringing you these first 11 episodes. And we will be back in 2 weeks' time Unfortunately, no podcast next week due to myself being away at the Italian Grand Prix, but I will be back with stories. You can equally keep on board with what I'm getting up to over at Monza by going to catch up with me on Twitter and Instagram at GT2_driving. You can catch Sab on Twitter at Alan Sabatino. You can check out our league at Invictus RL on Twitter and Instagram, Invictus Racing League on YouTube. Go to the website, invictusracingleague.com, if you want to get yourself on the grid for any of our leagues, whether that be F1 or equally GT Sport. We race GT Sport here on Thursday nights on Twitch, and that's on Thursday nights for our DTM League, and on Sunday nights now, which is just starting, and that's our WEC League with LMP1. So 2 GT Sport leagues for you to enjoy on Thursdays and Sundays. So if you want to get involved in any of our F1 2019 or GT Sport content, go to the website, go to the Apply to Race section, and get yourself on the grid. I implore you, it will be brilliant and you'll love it. And yeah, it was a pleasure bringing it to you. Hopefully you enjoyed these first 11 episodes. We look forward to bringing you the next 11, and we will be back in 2 weeks' time. But for now, enjoy the Belgian Grand Prix, enjoy the Italian Grand Prix, and we will see you soon.